Welcome to the Disturbance, hosted by Dave DeBar.
Good afternoon, North America, and welcome to the Daily Disturbance. It is Monday afternoon, October 12th, 2020, and this is episode number 2 of the Daily Disturbance. I am Dave DeBar, and we've got an absolutely huge show for you today. On today's show, we're going to cover the National Basketball Association Championship. I'll tell you why all of those LeBron James haters should probably at least stop hating LeBron James until after the Los Angeles Lakers hold a virtual parade. Plus, so much went on in the National Football League that it's hard to sort of bring it all together, especially in a show that we try to knock out in 10 to 15 minutes. So we're going to cover some of what happened in the National Football League, not all of it, but I do have this quick question for you. What is it that Adam Gase actually needs to do to lose his job as the head coach of those New York Football Jets? Like, what is it that they're looking for in New York that will finally make them at that point say, Adam Gase, you're out of here? What, a home loss to the Arizona Cardinals by 20 wasn't enough? I'm just blown away that Adam Gase is still a head coach in this National Football League. Look, I've got all of that, a bunch of other National Football League stories for you as well on the big show. All right, so let's dive into this National Basketball Association Championship. LeBron James, as we know, is one of the greatest basketball players of all time. Where you put him on your Mount Rushmore is up to you. I grew up in the era of Michael Jordan. Hands down, Michael Jordan is still the best basketball player I've ever seen play. In this particular era that we're in now, especially over the last 10 years in the NBA, I would say that LeBron James is the best basketball player in the world. Not only can I say that, you can actually back that up with stats. Like, how many times has he been to the NBA Finals in the last 10 years? What is it, like 9 out of 10 years? So LeBron James, hands down the best basketball player in the world. And it's not because he's a great three-point shooter. It's not because he's the best post-up player. It's not because he gets a bunch of rebounds. It's not because he's 7'2" and can dribble. It's not any of that. It's that LeBron James is basically a camouflage basketball player. He can do whatever you need him to do. He is, if you will, the Swiss Army knife of basketball players in this National Basketball Association era. And he knows how to use himself to better the teams around him. Look, how else can you explain a team like the Anthony Davis-led team from like 2.5 years ago? You know, the one that had Drew Holiday, a bunch of other really young players on it. And you look at that roster and you compare it to this Los Angeles Lakers roster, hands down, that New Orleans Pelicans roster minus LeBron James was a better roster. Take Anthony Davis, bring him to the Los Angeles Lakers, sign J.R. Smith late, it doesn't matter. Have Danny Green play poorly in the NBA Finals, it doesn't matter. Have Alex Caruso occasionally deliver, it doesn't matter. Have the streaky KCP show up for half of the NBA Finals games, it doesn't matter. Look, outside of Rajon Rondo, in this NBA Finals, it was LeBron James and Anthony Davis that won this for the Los Angeles Lakers, and quite frankly, it's as simple as that. The Lakers have won their 17th NBA title. They are now tied with the Boston Celtics at 17. I just got to tell you, I mean, like, I know there's all of these sort of like LeBron James haters in the world, and certainly a lot of Los Angeles Laker haters out there as well. But when you actually are being objective, if you can do that for a second, and you're being objective and you look at all of those trips to the NBA Finals and you look at his cast of characters around him, you really have to give it to LeBron James at this point. He shouldn't have to go on national I'm telling you this right now. LeBron James shouldn't have to go on national television and talk about a Los Angeles Laker team that doesn't have respect. It just shouldn't happen. Okay. All right. So moving on to the National Football League. Now, a lot of things went down in the NFL yesterday, as we all know. The Dak Prescott update is that surgery, which happened late last night, went well. And he's expected, the prognosis is that he'll have a full recovery and be as good as ever. But we won't see Dak again this year. And there'll be all sorts of stuff about the Cowboys and should they resign him and should they not resign him and all this other stuff. But what I want to put an end to right now, what is most important about this particular conversation at this point, and yes, we hope Dak Prescott gets well, and yes, we want to see him back. But this very idea that all of these people in the media have been floating over the last basically 24, it's been almost 24 hours since Dak's injury, that Andy Dalton is somehow going to be a better fit for this Dallas Cowboy team. It makes absolutely no sense to me that Andy Dalton is going to somehow sort of figure out how to lead this Dallas Cowboy team to a 9-7 record and win this division. Look, Andy Dalton might win the division for this Cowboy team, but they'll probably do it with a 7-9 record. Have you seen how bad this Dallas Cowboy defense is? The New York Giants, who couldn't score more than 10 points basically against anybody all season long, basically scored a ton of points against the Cowboys in this particular game. Look, this Dallas Cowboy defense makes bad offenses look like Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. It is that simple. For God's sakes, the Giants scored 34 points. 34 points. So, first of all, Andy Dalton's not the same kind of quarterback that Dak Prescott is at this stage of his career. Andy Dalton is essentially a pocket passer. I'm not saying Andy Dalton is as bad as Phillip Rivers at this stage of his career, which we'll get into in a second, but I am saying that Andy Dalton is not an upgrade from Dak Prescott, which is how a lot of people have been sort of framing it. Leave it to the myopic Dallas Cowboy media and the myopic Dallas Cowboy fans to actually think that, oh, well, we'll just plug in Andy Dalton and everything's going to be fine. 7-9, I'm telling you, is the best you can do with Andy Dalton as your starting quarterback in the National Football League. A quick trauma center update for you. Joe Burrow got sacked 7 times. That means he's been sacked 48 times in 5 games in the National Football League. 48 times Joe Burrow has hit the turf. So the trauma center update is that he didn't have to go to the trauma center, but he got sacked 7 times against the Ravens. And of course, he lost that game big time. All right. Elsewhere around the National Football League, last night on Sunday Night Football, we all saw Mike Zimmer and Gary Kubiak sort of smugly get together to decide to go for the win on a 1-yard rush attempt with 2 minutes to go in the game on 4th down that would have put the Seahawks out of their misery. And of course it failed. And the controversy is, should they have kicked the field goal or not? Normally, I love the call. Normally, I would say, yes, this is a great idea. Let's just go for the win and let's just crush them. But if you've watched every Minnesota Viking football game, like I have this year, you're well aware that this is quite frankly, a defense with a bunch of players that even the biggest Minnesota Viking fan can't name at this point. There's just so many new players on this team that to think they were going to have their schemes ready to go to prevent one of the greatest sort of comeback quarterbacks of this era, and Russell Wilson, and to prevent him from going, all the way down to win the game, it just made no sense. So I would have taken my chances. I would have taken a couple more seconds off the clock, and I would have kicked the field goal, gone up by 8, and then, hopefully would have stopped Russell on a 2-point conversion to win the game. That was the right thing to do. You're on the road in Seattle. Your team has fought back. You've done everything that you could possibly do to keep this team in it, a team that could have completely fallen apart after it was clear that Dalvin Cook wasn't going to be back in the game, and they didn't. And you just handed it away by making probably one of the worst coaching decisions in the NFL so far this year. Speaking of bad coaches and bad decisions, we started out the show, talked a little bit about Adam Gase, and in all seriousness, what does he really need to do next? What is it that the New York Jets front office and the New York Jets ownership group is looking for? What is it that he has to do to get fired? Now, I'm hoping that the answer is in their next game, be down by 20 at halftime, and they can him at halftime. I would love to see a head coach in the National Football League someday actually get canned at halftime. Wouldn't that be great? Speaking of canned coaches, look, Arthur Blank has been as slow as a sloth in his decision to finally get rid of Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn should have been gone last year, and we all know it. Dan Quinn maybe shouldn't have even been the head coach of that team last year as it was. But still, they brought him back. And I saw this earlier in the day, and an analyst was saying, well, Dan Quinn's or Arthur Blank's just been worried about having to do a rebuild. Hey, Arthur, your team is 0-5. You are officially in a rebuild mode. It doesn't matter who your starting quarterback is. It doesn't matter how many washed up running backs you bring in, how many great young wide receivers you have. If you don't have a head coach that can manipulate the defense into actually tackling occasionally, you're not going anywhere. So the Falcons are in real trouble, as we all know. So real quick, speaking of respect in the National Football League, and we're going to finish today's show. These shows are 10 to 15 minutes in length. So going to finish today's show talking a little bit about Mike Tomlin, the great head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I saw LeBron James, give his speech last night, and I thought, I don't think Mike Tomlin gets the kind of respect he should get as well. Look, when that Pittsburgh Steelers front office made bad decisions, when that Pittsburgh Steelers team had, 20 plus injuries, Mike Tomlin at the very least kept them in the playoff picture. Mike Tomlin is by far one of the top coaches in this here National Football League and certainly deserves some respect. They are 4-0, totally flying under the radar. Yes, they allowed the Philadelphia Eagles to get back into that game yesterday. Yes, that's true, but they did end up winning. And the stat of the day inside the National Football League, and there's all sorts of stats as we know, but the stat of the day, here it is, 13 for 13 in third down conversions for Big Ben Roethlisberger. When have you heard a stat like that in the National Football League? You absolutely have to give it to Mike Tomlin for that. All right, last thing before we get out of here, and I wasn't sure I was actually going to have enough time to get into this, but it looks like I do, so I'm going to do it. And this is important. Now, I spent a lot of time over the years watching a lot of football. I have favorite players who aren't on my favorite teams. Phillip Rivers was one of those players. Now, I've watched Phillip Rivers play quarterback in the National Football League since the start of his career. I can tell you about 2.5 years ago, I said the end is near for Phillip. I can tell you that midway through last season, I said the end is here for Phillip Rivers. I can tell you at the very end of the season, I said Phillip Rivers should just go into coaching at this point. I know he has like 50 kids to support, but he should still go into coaching at this point. And Phillip Rivers gets signed by the Indianapolis Colts. I'm flipping back and forth between all the games yesterday, and I get into the, I think it was the fourth quarter of that Colts game, and I happened to catch Phillip Rivers, who looked like he needed two hands to throw a pass. I kid you not. It was like he had two hands trying to throw a 10-yard pass, and it still fell short. Phillip Rivers' sidearm passing has been taken over by something that we call here on planet Earth gravity. As he's gotten older, his arm has gotten closer to the ground. Phillip Rivers is absolutely done as a quarterback in the National Football League. I could rattle off the stats for you, but I'll just tell you there were no touchdowns. There were 2 interceptions. Yes, Phillip Rivers is a gunslinger, but he's a gunslinger that's completely out of bullets at this point. If you're the Indianapolis Colts and you paid Phillip Rivers $25 million, you should be asking for a refund. Okay. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to the Daily Disturbance. I am David DeBaugh. Do check out our big sports website at mighty.rip. Yes, that is the URL. Mighty, there's a dot, and then you spell the R and the I and the P, and you get to mighty.rip. Check it out. Some pretty good witty sports commentary, blogs, and more. Feature stories, new content on a daily basis, all of that. For the Daily Disturbance, I am Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports day.